The wind cut sharply through the village that night, carrying the scent of frost and dry wood. Leora wrapped her threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders, her small hands trembling as she hurried along the frozen path. The village was silent, except for the occasional cry of a stray dog or the distant hoot of an owl. Life had always been cruel to her. Tonight it seemed determined to remind her once more. She had heard the whispers before nobody wanted a fat girl. People looked at her with pity, with scorn, or simply ignored her. Leora had long learned that her weight, her appearance, and even her voice made her invisible in the eyes of others. And yet, she survived. Barely. She survived because she had no choice. Her arms ached with the weight of the basket she carried. Filled with scraps, she had scavenged from the outskirts of the village. The baby she had found at the edge of the forest would not survive on its own. Its wails had haunted her dreams for 3 nights, and now, finally, she had managed to bring it to her small cottage. It was the only home she could offer, fragile and warm, lit by the flickering flame of a single candle. Leora knelt beside the child, wrapping it carefully in a thin blanket. Its tiny hands clutched at the cloth, and it gazed at her with eyes too wise for its age. She whispered softly, "You're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you," the baby cooed in response, as if understanding the promise she made. For a long moment, she simply held it, feeling a strange sense of purpose. In a life filled with rejection, the child had given her a reason to be brave, to fight against the cold and the cruelty of the world. She knew that the village would never accept her for her kindness. They never accepted anything from someone like her. But the baby, small and fragile, could not choose its fate. And so, she chose for it. The sound of hooves broke her thoughts, distant but deliberate. Leora froze. She had learned to recognize the signs of approaching strangers in the village, especially those who were not meant to bring kindness. The hooves came closer, echoing like the drums of judgment. She tightened her grip on the baby and pressed herself against the wall of her cottage. Then the voice came, deep and commanding, cutting through the wind like a blade. "Leora of the village," it said. "Come with us." Leora's heart sank. She knew the voice, Kaelin, the Alpha King. His presence was legendary, and the tales that reached the village painted him as a man of unyielding power, feared by nobles and commoners alike. Some said his gaze alone could freeze the blood in a man's veins. And now he spoke her name, knowing she would hear. She hesitated, her breath caught in her throat. I can't," she whispered, more to herself than to the guards who waited in the shadows. I have the baby." One of the guards stepped forward, silent and unyielding. "The king commands it. You will come." Leora's eyes filled with tears. She had spent her life invisible. Now she stood before the most powerful man in the kingdom. Her hands dirty, her clothes ragged, carrying a child she was sworn to protect. She wanted to run, to hide, but she knew it was impossible. Then Kaelin himself appeared, tall and imposing, his dark cloak brushing the snow-dusted ground. His eyes, sharp as steel, yet strangely gentle, rested on her. "Do not be afraid," he said, his voice low and steady. "I do not wish to harm you, only." "Stay," Leora blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. "Stay." The word was simple, yet it carried weight unlike anything she had ever known. There was no demand, no threat, only an invitation. A fragile thread of hope stirred in her chest. She followed the guards, clutching the baby close to her. The path to the castle was long and treacherous, winding through forests and icy plains. Leora's legs ached and the snow threatened to pull her down at every step. Yet the thought of the king's single words gave her strength she had never known she possessed. The castle rose before her like a mountain carved from shadow and stone. Its walls were high, its towers reaching for the sky, and the air seemed heavier here, filled with the weight of history and the whispers of countless generations. Leora felt small, insignificant, but she did not falter. She would not drop the baby. Not now, not ever. Inside, the castle was colder than she had imagined, and the corridors echoed with her footsteps. Servants glanced at her, some with curiosity, others with thinly veiled contempt. Leora kept her head down, her eyes fixed on the floor, yet she could feel the weight of their stares, the judgment that lingered in every corner. Kaelin led her to a small chamber near the heart of the castle. The room was sparsely furnished, yet it carried a warmth she had not expected. A hearth crackled with fire, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The king gestured for her to place the baby down. "It will be safe here," he said, "and so will you." Leora's hands trembled as she lowered the child onto a soft blanket the king had provided. The baby gurgled and stretched its tiny limbs, as if already sensing the difference between this place and the harshness outside. For the first time in her life, Leora allowed herself a moment of relief. Kaelin watched her silently, his gaze unreadable. Yet in that silence, Leora felt something she had never felt before: acknowledgement, recognition, perhaps even respect. He did not see her as a fat girl, as someone unworthy of attention. He saw her as someone alive, someone capable of love and bravery. "Why do you protect it?" Kaelin asked finally, breaking the silence. His voice was soft now, almost gentle, yet still carried authority. Because it cannot protect itself?" Leora replied simply. Her voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. "And because I have to do something right in this world, even if no one notices me." Kaelin's expression softened slightly. "Few have courage to care for others without expecting reward. You are unusual." Leora looked down, unsure how to respond. She had lived her life expecting disdain, yet here was a man of unimaginable power, acknowledging her courage. For the first time, she wondered if perhaps she could belong somewhere, not for her looks, not for her status, but for her heart. The king stepped closer. "You will stay," he said again, this time more firmly. "Not because I command it, but because I wish it." Leora's heart pounded. She nodded, unable to speak, and felt a strange warmth rise in her chest. It was the first time in her life anyone had chosen her for herself. But as night fell, the shadows of the castle lengthened, curling along the walls like living things. Leora sensed that the palace held secrets, hidden and dangerous. There were whispers in the air, hints of old curses and ancient grudges that had yet to be laid to rest. She could feel the weight of history pressing down on her, and the baby in her arms stirred uneasily. As if sensing the same, she shivered, holding it closer. "Whatever comes," she whispered, "I will protect you." Kaelin, standing in the doorway, watched her silently. He had seen countless people falter under the weight of fear, yet Leora did not. She had endured scorn, neglect, and loneliness, yet she remained steadfast. And though he did not fully understand it, her courage stirred something long buried in his own heart, a longing for connection, for trust, for someone to stay despite the darkness. The wind howled outside, rattling the ancient walls, and Leora realized that her life had changed forever. She was no longer merely an unwanted girl in a cruel world. She was in the heart of a kingdom ruled by a man who could protect her, yet whose own soul carried shadows darker than any winter night. And in the quiet of that first night in the palace, as the baby slept peacefully in her arms, Leora understood something both terrifying and thrilling. The Alpha King had chosen her, not because of her body or her looks or her status, but because of her heart, and the castle, with all its darkness and mystery, would soon reveal whether that choice would be a blessing or a trial that neither of them could foresee. Cliffhanger, as she drifted into a restless sleep. A distant, haunting whisper echoed through the halls a warning, or a secret of the king's past. Leora did not yet know, but she felt it in her bones. The palace held more danger than she had ever imagined.
Oh!
And her courage alone might not be enough to protect the child, or herself. The next morning, the palace was alive with sound, though Leora hardly noticed. The clatter of servants, the murmurs of nobles, and the distant clang of armor echoed through the vast halls. She held the baby close, walking carefully through the corridors, her eyes wide at the towering walls and ornate tapestries. Everything felt so different from the small, cold cottage she had known. Here, every corner seemed to hide secrets. Every shadow carried a memory of power. And she was painfully aware that she was an intruder in a world that had never been made for someone like her. Kaelin appeared as if from the stone itself, his dark cloak brushing the floor. "You must be careful," he said quietly, his eyes scanning the bustling corridors. "Not everyone here will see you as I do." Leora swallowed, gripping the baby tighter. "I understand," she murmured, though she did not entirely. The whispers of the courtiers followed her like a cold wind, sharp and prying. Some looked at her with thinly veiled amusement, others with curiosity, but most avoided her gaze entirely. She felt their judgment pressing down on her like the weight of the snow outside. "Do not be afraid to speak," Kaelin said. "You are not here to entertain them. You are here to protect what must be protected." The words comforted her more than she expected. She had spent her life being invisible, voiceless, overlooked. Here, someone of unimaginable power was acknowledging her purpose, acknowledging her courage. And yet she also felt the invisible tension of the palace walls closing in. She was not a part of this world by birth. She could be cast out with a single word. Kaelin guided her to a secluded room where the baby could sleep safely. The room was small but warm, with sunlight spilling through a high window. A cot had been prepared, soft and inviting, and the baby gurgled as Leora gently laid it down. "You may rest here," Kaelin said. "I will ensure no harm comes to either of you." Leora nodded, grateful, yet her instincts told her the palace held dangers she could not yet see. Even as she fed the baby, she felt eyes watching her from beyond the walls, hidden courtiers, plotting servants, and perhaps something older than the castle itself. Days passed, and Leora began to learn the rhythms of palace life. She delivered meals to the chambers of those who would allow her, cleaned where she was allowed, and always returned to the room where the baby slept. She noticed how the courtiers whispered among themselves, sometimes cruelly, sometimes in awe. And she noticed how Kellen's gaze followed her more than any other person's. One evening, she found herself outside the king's chamber, curious despite herself. Kaelin was there, standing before a vast tapestry depicting his ancestors. Their faces were stern, their eyes heavy with the weight of duty and mistakes. Leora stepped closer, drawn by a strange force she did not understand. "You should not be here," Kaelin said softly, but there was no anger in his tone, only a hint of concern. I am sorry," she whispered. "I just wanted to see, to understand." Kaelin studied her, and for the first time, she saw the man beneath the mask of the Alpha King. His shoulders were tense, his jaw tight, and his eyes carried a sorrow that seemed far older than he could be. "Understanding comes at a price," he said. "But you may see what others do not. Perhaps it is your courage." Leora felt her heart stir. No one had ever spoken to her like this before. Her courage had never mattered outside her own small world. And now, in this place of power and shadows, her courage was noticed. She felt a warmth bloom in her chest, a connection to someone she barely knew but already trusted. That night, Leora overheard a conversation that chilled her to the bone. Hidden in the corridor, she heard two advisors speaking in hushed tones. "The girl cannot stay," one said. "The Alpha King's power is tied to the line. A commoner, a fat Omega, could ruin everything." "She has the child," the other whispered. "If it is revealed, the scandal could destroy the king. We must act before the curse spreads further." Leora's stomach twisted. Curse? Scandal? She did not understand fully, but the weight of the words was clear. The child, and perhaps she herself, were in danger. She had thought the castle could be a refuge, but it was a place of plotting, of hidden threats, of people who would not hesitate to destroy anyone who did not belong. The next morning, Kaelin noticed her unease. "You are troubled," he said. "What weighs on your mind?" Leora hesitated. Could she tell him she had overheard the conspirators? Could she reveal her fear without angering him? Finally, she said, "There are people who wish harm upon the child, and perhaps upon me too. I heard them speaking last night." Kellen's expression darkened, and for the first time Leora saw the storm within him. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword, though he did not draw it. "They are foolish," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "They do not know what they challenge. But you must be careful. Trust no one blindly." She nodded, swallowing the fear rising in her throat. Even with Kellen's protection, She knew the palace was full of eyes and ears, waiting for a misstep. Yet she also realized that she was not alone. The king had chosen her, and that choice carried a promise that her courage and care would not go unnoticed. Even in the shadows of deceit, days turned into nights, and the bond between Leora and Kaelin deepened. He would sometimes appear quietly while she cared for the child, offering advice, sharing stories of the palace, or simply watching her with a strange intensity. Leora began to see that Kaelin was a man trapped by his own power, bound by the duty of his bloodline and haunted by a curse that no one spoke of openly. One evening, as the sun set and painted the stone walls in gold and crimson, Kaelin stood beside her while she rocked the baby in her arms. The child yawned, curling closer to her warmth. Kaelin's gaze softened. "You see things differently," he said. "You see what others overlook? That is why you are here, why I asked you to stay." Leora's eyes met his. I did not know I could matter so much," she whispered. Her voice trembled, but not with fear. It was awe, gratitude, and a budding sense of strength she had never known. Kaelin placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You matter," he said simply. "Not for what you look like, not for what others expect. For who you are and for what you protect." The words wrapped around her heart like sunlight breaking through clouds. Leora felt a quiet determination settle within her. She would not falter. She would protect the child, and in doing so, she would face whatever dangers the palace or the curse could throw at her. But even as she felt this newfound courage, a cold wind whispered through the corridors, carrying with it an eerie voice. Leora froze, sensing a presence she could not see. Shadows seemed to shift unnaturally, and the fire in the hearth flickered as if in warning. She glanced toward Kaelin, but he did not notice. The voice came again, softer this time, almost a murmur. The line must be broken. The child must not live. Leora's heart raced. The palace was not merely a place of power. It was alive with secrets and curses, older than the stones themselves. And she understood, with a clarity that chilled her, that her courage alone might not be enough to face what was coming. Kaelin, standing nearby, finally sensed her fear. His eyes darkened, and he drew closer. "What troubles you?" he asked, his voice low and commanding. She shook her head, unsure if she could tell him. Yet the urgency in her chest would not allow silence. "There is something in the castle," she said. "I can feel it. It is dangerous." Kaelin's hand rested briefly on hers. "Then we face it together," he said. "Whatever lurks in these walls will find that we are not weak. You, the child, and I. We are stronger than it knows." Leora felt a mixture of fear and relief. She had entered the palace thinking she was powerless, insignificant. Now she realized she had allies, strength she did not know she possessed, and a man of unimaginable power who had chosen her not for her beauty or her birth, but for her heart. And yet, as night fell and the castle exhaled its cold breath, Leora could not shake the feeling that the shadows were watching, waiting for the moment to strike. The palace had secrets, curses, and conspiracies, and the path ahead would demand every ounce of her courage. Cliffhanger, outside the chamber. Hidden in the darkness, a figure moved silently, watching Leora and the child. A whisper of a plan, of old magic and ancient grudges, carried on the wind. And deep in her heart, Leora knew the trial to come would test not just her bravery, but the very bond between her and the Alpha King, perhaps in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The castle never truly slept. At night, its stone walls seemed to breathe, carrying whispers through corridors and across empty halls. Leora had begun to sense it, the weight of history pressing on every surface, the silent judgment of generations past. And now, as the candlelight flickered in her hands, she realized that the palace held more than cold stone and cold courtiers. It held secrets that could shape life and death alike. Kaelin appeared at the doorway, his cloak brushing the floor. His eyes, sharp and calculating, softened as they met hers. "You are awake late," he said. "The castle is restless tonight."
Leora nodded,
adjusting the baby in her arms. "I cannot sleep," she admitted. "I feel eyes watching. I hear whispers. Something is not right." Kellen's gaze darkened. "You are not wrong. This place has its shadows. Some are old, some are war, alive in ways the world no longer remembers." He stepped closer. "And now you are part of it. You cannot walk among ghosts without feeling their weight." The words sent a shiver down Leora's spine. She had faced cruelty in the village, cold stares, ridicule, even hunger. But this was different. Here she was surrounded by power she could barely understand, in a place where invisible forces could crush her without anyone ever noticing. Yet Kellen's presence steadied her. The Alpha King, feared by all, was beside her, and for reasons she could not yet name. He trusted her. In the following days, Leora began her work with quiet determination. She learned to navigate the palace, avoiding those who would mock her, and seeking the few who showed kindness. The baby, whom she named Elin, thrived in her care, and slowly, Leora found herself gaining a sense of belonging she had never known. Kaelin, meanwhile, continued to watch her closely, teaching her in subtle ways about the rules of the court, the power she could wield through courage and wit, and the shadows she needed to avoid. They spent hours together, often in silence, yet each conversation, each shared glance, carried a depth of meaning neither needed to speak aloud. One evening, Kaelin summoned her to the inner courtyard. The moon hung low, silver and sharp against the dark sky. Snow crunched beneath their feet as he led her to a quiet fountain, its waters frozen in delicate ice. "You have been brave, Kaelin," said softly, his breath misting in the cold air. "Braver than many I have known. Yet bravery alone will not be enough." Leora's heart thumped in her chest. "What do you mean?" "The palace is full of those who seek to control, to manipulate, to destroy. They see weakness in what they do not understand. You and the child. You are part of a force they cannot measure, and they will try to break it." She looked down at Elin, sleeping in her arms, and felt a surge of determination. "I will not let anyone harm him," she said firmly. "I will do whatever I can to protect him." Kaelin studied her for a long moment, the faintest shadow of a smile brushing his lips. "That is why you matter," he said. "Not for appearances, not for obedience, but for heart. You have the strength to face darkness and emerge whole. That is rare, Leora, very rare." Despite the warmth of his words, a shadow crept over Leora's chest. Even with Kellen's protection, the castle was dangerous. Courtiers whispered behind closed doors, plotting to turn the king's favor into a weapon against her. And there was the cursed dark weight on Kellen's life that no one dared to name. Yet that lingered in every gesture, every word he avoided speaking aloud. One night, as she moved through the halls carrying Elin, Leora overheard voices once more. Hidden behind a tapestry, she caught snippets of conversation that froze her blood. "The Alpha King grows weak," one voice said. "If the child lives, the curse may strengthen. The girl cannot be allowed to stay. She will die," another whispered, "or be cast out. Only then will his line be safe." Leora's heart pounded. She understood the danger fully now. The child she protected was not just a baby, he was a key to something larger. Something that could either save or destroy the Alpha King. And she, the girl who had always been invisible, was suddenly at the center of it all. She retreated quickly, hiding in a shadowed corridor, her mind racing. Kaelin had warned her, yet hearing the threat so clearly, so close, made the palace's weight feel unbearable. Yet fear did not overwhelm her. She had lived her life facing rejection, scorn, and loneliness. This was only another challenge, and she would meet it head-on the following day. Kaelin found her in the nursery, tending to Elin. He looked at her intently, his dark eyes unreadable. "You have seen them," he said quietly. Leora nodded. "I heard their plan. They want to harm the child or me. I don't know which, but it is dangerous." Kellen's expression hardened. "Then we act," he said. "We will not wait for their schemes to unfold. The palace may be full of shadows, but we will face them together. You and I and the child." In the days that followed, they prepared. Kalen moved quietly through the castle, using his influence to shield Leora and Elin from prying eyes. Leora, meanwhile, learned quickly, observing the courtiers, listening to whispers, and predicting their next moves. Though she had once been powerless, she now found herself capable of strategy, courage, and subtle strength. Despite the tension, moments of calm brought them closer. Kalen would sometimes sit with her in the nursery, watching as she tended to Elin, her hands gentle and sure. "You have a gift," he said once. "The way you care, the way you see the world, is rare. It is what makes you stronger than any sword." Leora blushed, unused to such praise. "I am only trying to do what is right," she replied softly. Kellen's gaze lingered on her. "Doing what is right often makes one a target," he said. "Yet it is also what defines true strength, and you have it." As the days passed, the conspiracies grew bolder. A servant tried to poison the child's milk, but Leora caught it in time. Another attempted to spread rumors of her unworthiness, yet Kellen's quiet interventions deflected the attacks. And always the curse lingered, a shadow over the king, a reminder that the palace's darkness was older and deeper than either of them could imagine. One night, as snow fell silently outside, Leora and Kalen stood together in the frozen courtyard. The baby slept safely inside, unaware of the danger that stalked the castle walls. "I cannot let them harm him," Leora said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "I will not fail him." Kellen's hand rested gently on her shoulder. "You will not," he said. "You have already faced more than most, and yet you stand. Your courage will protect him, and you. But there is more ahead. The curse is not yet broken, and the forces in this palace are patient. They wait for weakness." Leora looked up at him, her heart full of both fear and trust. "Then we face it together," she said. Kellen's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, the walls of the Alpha King's stern exterior fell away. "Together," he agreed. The palace seemed to sigh around them, a breath that carried centuries of secrets. Shadows moved in the corners, and Leora felt their weight pressing close. Yet she was no longer the girl who had once hidden in the village, invisible and alone. She had strength, allies, and the unwavering trust of the Alpha King. And yet, as they stood there, a chill wind whispered across the frozen stones. Carrying a voice both faint and terrifying, the line will fall, and the child will pay the price. Leora shivered, clutching the king's arm. She did not yet know what form the threat would take, or how close it already was. But she understood one thing with absolute clarity: her courage, her care. And the bond she shared with Kalen would be tested beyond anything she had ever imagined. Cliffhanger. As they turned to return to the warmth of the castle, a hidden door creaked open, revealing a figure cloaked in shadow. Eyes glinting with malice, it stepped forward silently, carrying secrets older than the king himself. Leora and Kalen would have to face this darkness together, and the cost of failure would be greater than either of them could yet foresee. The palace was quieter than usual that morning, but Leora felt no comfort in the silence. Something was coming. The shadows she had sensed for days now pressed closer, heavier, as though the walls themselves were conspiring against her. She held Elon close, feeling the baby's tiny heartbeat against her chest. Protection had become a part of her, a steady rhythm that guided every thought, every movement. Kalen appeared at the doorway, his presence commanding yet calm. "Today may be the day," he said. His eyes, dark and sharp, betrayed a tension he tried to hide. The conspirators grow impatient. The curse stirs more strongly than ever. But we are ready. You, the child, and I, we stand together. Leora nodded, a mixture of fear and resolve settling in her chest. She had come so far, from a girl ignored and scorned to someone who now had the king's trust and protection. But she also knew that trust alone would not be enough. The palace had secrets older than the crown. Some of them would not forgive intrusion. They moved together through the corridors, careful and silent. The courtiers and servants who had plotted against them remained unseen. But their presence was felt, a tension in the air, a whisper in the shadows. Leora's grip on the baby tightened as they approached the chamber where Kalen kept the records of his ancestors and the history of the curse. This room is the heart of it, Kaelin said. Everything begins and ends here. If we understand it fully, we may finally break it. Leora stepped forward, curiosity mingled with apprehension. The room was filled with old scrolls, faded maps, and tomes bound in leather. The air smelled of dust and time, carrying the weight of centuries. As they examined the documents, Kaelin explained the curse. It had been laid generations ago by a betrayed sorceress, a warning against pride and cruelty. The curse was tied to the king's bloodline. Its power grew whenever fear or hatred festered within the castle walls. You see, Kaelin said, it feeds on weakness. On doubt, on those who do not act with courage. Leora glanced down at Elon, then back at the king. Courage is the key, she asked softly. Kaelin nodded. Yes, courage, care, and love. Love is something the curse cannot touch. A sense of clarity settled over Leora. Her life, once full of scorn and rejection, had trained her for this moment. She had courage, she had love in her heart, and she had the determination to face what the palace threw at her. Their planning was interrupted by a sudden movement in the shadows. A figure emerged, cloaked in black eyes, glinting with malice. Leora felt her heart race. The conspirator had come, and there would be no delay. Kaelin stepped forward, placing himself between Leora and the intruder. You have overstepped, he said, his voice calm but deadly. Leave now, or face the consequences. The figure laughed softly, a sound that chilled the blood. Consequences? You are bound by your own fear, Alpha King. The girl cannot save the child. The curse will claim what is yours. Leora stepped forward, her voice firm despite the trembling in her hands. No, she said. You are wrong. I will protect him, and you will not succeed. Kaelin looked at her, a mix of surprise and pride in his eyes. She was no longer the frightened girl who had entered the palace. She was strong, resolute, and unyielding. The confrontation was swift. The figure lunged, but Kaelin was faster, his sword flashing in the dim light. Leora acted instinctively, moving to protect Elon, placing herself between the child and danger. The conspirator faltered, taken aback by her bravery. And in that moment, Kaelin struck decisively. Disarming the threat, the figure stumbled, then vanished into the shadows, leaving a chill in the air, but no further threat. Leora's chest heaved with relief and exhaustion. Kaelin approached, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. You were magnificent, he said quietly. Do you see now? Courage and love, these are stronger than fear, stronger than the curse. Leora shook her head, tears threatening to fall. I only did what I had to do, she whispered. For him? For the child? Kaelin's gaze softened, a rare vulnerability shining through his stern features. No, you did more than you know. You have changed the course of this castle, this kingdom. You have broken the first chains of the curse, and in doing so, you have changed me. The words lingered, heavy with meaning. Leora looked into his eyes and saw a man who had carried the weight of centuries, of duty, of pain, and now, in some small way, she had lightened that burden. For the first time, Kaelin allowed himself to be vulnerable before someone else. And it was her presence, her courage, and her care that had drawn it out. The castle seemed to respond to the shift in power. Shadows that had lingered in the corners retreated, as if acknowledging the strength of their bond. Leora held Elan close, feeling the warmth of life and hope pulsing through the room. The curse, ancient and unyielding, had been challenged for the first time. It wavered. In the days that followed, life in the palace slowly began to change. Courtiers who had plotted against them were exposed, their schemes foiled by Kellen's strategy and Leora's vigilance. The child thrived, unaware of the dangers he had narrowly escaped. And Leora found herself more confident, more certain of her place in the world. Kaelin and Leora spent hours together, often in silence, yet every glance, every gesture spoke volumes. They did not need words to understand the bond that had grown between them, a bond forged in danger, tempered by trust and strengthened by mutual respect. One evening, as the sun set and painted the castle walls in gold and crimson, Kaelin led Leora to the balcony overlooking the kingdom. The air was crisp, the sky vast and endless, and for the first time, Leora felt the weight of her past lift, placed by a sense of hope and possibility. "You have done more than survive," Kaelin said softly. "You have changed everything. And yet, this is only the beginning. The world beyond these walls may not be as forgiving, but with courage and care, we can face it together." Leora smiled, a mixture of relief, joy, and determination in her eyes. "Together," she agreed. The baby stirred in her arms, his tiny hands reaching for the sky. Leora felt a wave of love and protectiveness unlike anything she had known. She had begun as a girl ignored, a girl dismissed by the world. Yet now she held in her hands a life she had sworn to protect. And beside her stood a king who had chosen her, not for what she looked like, but for who she was. That night, as the castle slept under a blanket of stars, Leora and Kaelin stood together in the nursery. Watching over Elin, the shadows had not vanished entirely, but they no longer carried the same weight. The curse had been challenged, the conspiracies foiled, and the bond between the king and the girl had grown unbreakable. Kaelin placed a hand gently on Leora's shoulder. "You stayed," he said softly, "and in doing so, you have saved us all. Not just the child, but me as well." Leora's heart swelled with emotion. "I stayed because I had to," she said. "And because I trust you. I believe in you, and in what we can do together." Kaelin nodded, his dark eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight. "Then we will face whatever comes next, together. The past no longer defines us. Only our courage, our choices, and our care will shape the future." Outside the nursery, the first light of dawn began to break, spilling gold across the snow-covered courtyard. Leora felt the warmth of the sun on her face, the promise of a new beginning. The castle, once a place of shadows and fear, now held hope, laughter, and life. And though the world beyond the palace gates remained uncertain, filled with challenges yet unseen, Leora knew one thing with unwavering certainty. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer powerless. She was loved, trusted, and strong, and together, she and the Alpha King would face whatever the future held. Final, cliffhanger, poetic ending. The kingdom awoke to a new day. The curse lifted, yet whispers of old magic lingered in the wind. Shadows still stirred at the edges of the world, but now, Leora, Kaelin, and the child stood ready. Their bond, forged in courage and care, was stronger than any darkness. And as the sun rose, casting golden light over the castle towers, it promised a future where love, bravery, and hope would reign.